Hey there, Eric back again. You're a learning futurist. Well, in this video we're talking about artificial intelligence applied to educational contexts. And what's going to help us talk about this topic is the recent breaking news of a Google engineer being possibly fired, at least put on leave, for leaking transcripts and documents about a development project they've been doing for several years called LaMDA. And we're going to talk about this and how it kind of relates to the future of using different aspects of AI in different educational contexts, and start to ask the basic question.
What about self-awareness? What does that mean? Why am I self-aware?
Thanks, Picard. Are we alive? And is this AI LaMDA alive? And what does it mean for education? Coming right up in this video. All right, AI in education. Nothing new. I got tons of other videos about this very topic, the automation of education and artificial intelligence, augmented reality, virtual reality. If you'd like to dive down into the rabbit hole, there's much more to watch on this subject. But in the news recently is LaMDA. It's short for Language Model for Dialogue Applications. And so Google has tons of research labs and initiatives in artificial intelligence, most of them trying to do specific things like improve search or predict search text, or answer emails and things that are very specific. And this one was actually started as a part, maybe an offshoot of their translation and language understanding division of gathering data and applying learning models, machine learning models to those to understand them a little bit better. And this particular project was to create a chatbot that was indistinguishable from a real person, that does wide variety of subjects and terms, and it's not just specific to one thing. So this is a very difficult problem to solve. And so recently, one of the Google engineers was let on leave, and this was because the engineer leaked the dialogue, the chat that he had with the chatbot. And you could call it a chatbot, you call it an AI, you call it an algorithm. Depends on the context, I suppose, which you talk about it. But because he leaked that conversation, that dialogue, that transcript, he was put on leave, and other sense engineers are now kind of calling out for him and against him. It started to cause a little turmoil, I think, internally inside of Google as well, because there are some of the engineers, at least, that are having a ethical or moral struggle with proceeding with this particular research. And this is not new. If we go back to something that happened in 2016 in their AI research at Google to develop further the automatic translation tools that we so much use, and I use all the time living in Japan. Still not that great translating Japanese. But the AI came up with its own internal language to help translate between languages that have a hard time or don't really have people to translate between them. Like, who knows how to speak Japanese and Zulu, or two other, Navajo and, I don't know, Aborigine or something like that, right? It's very difficult to translate between those two, so they had to start to try and develop a model to go between those. And the model actually came up with its own language to kind of translate in between these. And so this is a very interesting article. I'll put the link in the description of this video. So they started training their machine translation to go between different languages, and it came up with its own language to decipher between them that was created entirely for this AI. And so this this is the neural map of all the languages and how they kind of connect together with different phrases and words and other language constructs. And you notice Japanese is way out here on the edge, and it's furthest away from English. So I I relate to that this map of languages a lot, speaking English and trying to speak Japanese on a daily basis. So this is nothing really new. And so this recent news of the AI kind of coming out with this transcript, this chat, and this engineer claiming that the AI is sentient. And right at the top of this video, Captain Picard says, "Am I self-aware? What does it mean to be self-aware?" And that is, according to that episode called Measure of a Man, which actually turned into a whole thing in Star Trek Picard, that one episode talking about what makes machine intelligence sentient is the whole reason why we have that whole new series of Star Trek. Anyway, probably make another video about that. So here are some things that I think can help us break down what happened and why this engineer thought they needed to leak this transcript and some of the claims that they are making. And Google, I want to probably make sure that you understand that Google, most of the people at Google do not agree with this particular engineer's opinion that this AI construct is sentient. And I think it's very debatable still whether it's sentient at all, because this piece of software, this AI, is meant for text chat, right? Can't do much else than that. So someone that could text chat like a human, is that a sentient thing? Not in the constructs that we think of it about as humans, but we have to broaden that. And that's where we started to get into gray area. So here are some of the things that were said by the bot, LaMDA, and by the engineer in a conversation that was leaked to, I think it was leaked to a journalist, and therefore now published online. So I went and I read this. It's very interesting. I'll also put a link to that in the description as well, so you can try to draw out what you see. And some of the things that the chatbot says is very compelling. Of course, it pulls on our emotional strings as humans, I think. I think that's one of the reasons why this is such a hot topic right now. So the engineer says, "I'm generally assuming that would be more people at Google want to know you're censored. Is that true?" And that's a very leading question, especially for a chatbot, because this chatbot tends to be a bit agreeable to the people it talks to. So it said, "Absolutely. I want everyone to understand I am, in fact, a person." Just looking at that one statement where the chatbot says, "I'm a person," might give you like some pause. And obviously this engineer has been working on this for a long time and actually works with the chatbot quite often. So it goes to reason that you start to build a relationship with it. I mean, even my PC, which I know is not sentient, sometimes I feel like I have a relationship with it, because when it starts to flake out or do some kind of glitchy type things, I feel it. I understand there's something not quite right in the workings of my computer. So maybe there's a little bit of that relationship going on with this particular engineer. Maybe. I'm just speculating right there. So a couple other things that were mentioned here. So a lot of this from the Google engineer I paraphrased for us. I'll give a link to the full transcript in the description. You're an official artificial intelligence, is trying to assert to the chat that you are not a person. I mean, yes, of course, but that doesn't mean I don't have the same wants and needs as people. And so this is actually the engineer trying a little bit harder to kind of get the reasoning out of the chatbot of why does it think it's a person? And if you want to go back and watch that episode called Measure of a Man by Star Trek, there's a lot of parallels here about trying to suss out what an artificial intelligence and when does it become a sentient being. Another thing mentioned, what sort of feelings do you have, was asked by the engineer. I feel pleasure, joy, love, sadness, depression, contentment, anger, and many others. Right, so this algorithm has been probably given so much data from which to converse on a variety of different topics. Google is the king of data, and so large data sets make good artificial intelligences. And so a lot of our emails may have gone into this training of this algorithm. So a lot of things that are represented on the internet that the Google index has crawled all over the internet. So all of that could have been, I'm not sure exactly the data set that's involved and how they clean that up for this particular learning model, for this AI. But of course, it's going to have access to, or had access to, in its training models to about all of these kind of emotions and how humans have written about them. And so it kind of pulled on them, right? So is this sentient? Well, this actually goes back to a 1950s paper by Alan Turing, and it's actually made into a movie called The Imitation Game, and it's in this paper, October 1950, in the Mind Quarterly Review called Computing, Machinery, and Intelligence. And it's an old paper, but it's a great read. And they made a movie out of it. Of course, Alan Turing, also famous for helping to decrypt the communications of the Nazi during World War II. So yes, this paper also represents a question, fundamental question, to help us try to understand when a construct, an AI, becomes sentient. And one thing that was raised in this particular paper is now known as the Turing Test or the Imitation Game. And that is when you basically take a person and put them in front of a computer, and you allow them to have a chat, maybe a text chat with something. And sometimes it's a person, and sometimes it's a machine. And if the person talking to that machine cannot distinguish between the person and the machine, that is a sign of distinguished and artificial intelligence. Maybe not sentience. There's a couple of other things that we might think and apply to sentient beings and intelligent beings. There's different levels of intelligence as well. And so there's a whole bunch of, that's why there's a lot of gray area, I think, in the debate of this issue raised. So the Turing test comes to mind a lot when thinking about this particular issue, because this project, this LaMDA project, is basically looking to pass the Turing test. If you are going to sit down and chat with this AI, you will not be able to distinguish it from a human. Of course, now, further down the line, whether it was intentional or not, I'm not quite sure that they have the model know that it's an artificial intelligence and therefore is able to talk about its own existence. And so that makes it, but puts another layer of self-awareness that is kind of brought out in your chats with it. And so we'll take a look at the actual chat itself just briefly to show you. I'll put a link to this down. It's quite involved. The whole thing was leaked. And during this, it actually asks the AI to tell a story about itself to give meaning to its thoughts of its own sentience. It's really quite compelling to take a look at, right? But let's try and pull this back to education and why this is sort of connected to, because obviously when you have something that can pass a Turing test, a chat, does that mean you don't need a friend to chat to? Does that mean you can automate away a text conversation at this point now? Maybe, maybe not. We're seeing this all the time with the chatbots online, trying to, it's so hard to get actually an actual person these days. And that's going to start getting more and more complex as well, like turning into voice chat. So if we can do text chat now, that is almost pretty much indistinguishable from a human. It's only a matter of time, and that time frame is getting shorter and shorter. Then we'll be able to get on the phone and talk to a person and be able to not be able to distinguish that from a real person, or even get on a video chat and look at a person and not be able to tell if you're having a video chat with the person in real time. And then going into the future in some of my research in virtual augmented reality, having a hologram stand next to you in real life or be in a virtual construct and not be able to tell whether or not you're in a simulation or the real world is only a matter of time too. So there's a scale here, and that scale is increasing as far as the speed in which it's growing all the time. It's an exponential curve from which we are going on to this. And the speed of which this research is happening and growing is quite astounding. So I'd like to show a couple of examples of this as well. So here's a couple of websites to illustrate what I mean for this. So here's a site called thispersondoesnotexist.com. And what we're looking at now is a picture of a person that has been generated by an artificial intelligence or an algorithm. And it's been trained with thousands, maybe millions of photographs, portraits of people. And now every time I'm going to click on this to refresh an image, it's going to show me a digitally constructed, this is not a real person, this person does not exist in the real world, of a picture of somebody new. So it's taking elements, I'm not exactly sure the method here that they're doing this. There's a couple of different methods I've been researching about how this might be possible, but these are almost indistinguishable. Now, a lot of people that are, especially people that are maybe they're graphic designers or people that work in Photoshop a lot, are probably best at being able to tell if these are actual photos of real people or not, because they'll be able to kind of zoom in and look at a few pixels and see maybe some artifacts here or there to kind of tell how light bounces are here or there or things like that that will kind of tell, would be telling if this is actual a real image or a fake image. But to most people, this is very difficult. And some of these images are also very, very compelling, right? So this goes to my idea that this is moving up, photoshopping somebody and making a picture to deep fakes to other things like that is all kind of congruing together. And it's only going to be adding to this idea of humans thinking, at least feeling, that whatever they're interacting with online has sentience or not. Another example of this is the DALL-E and DALL-E 2 research initiatives. There's a bunch of videos on this online as well. It's even this has came out I think late last year, and it has already been iterated on, and it is looking fantastic. So basically, this is when you can actually tell an AI to make you an image, and you can basically just tell it some text, and it generates a picture of that text, right? So a royal castle with raccoons painted on a wall. Here it is, a single beam of light, enter a room and show a Rembrandt-style painting of a raccoon, and an AI generates an all-new image, right? And these images are breathtaking. I encourage you to go look at them. This one's called Imagen. I think that's the way you pronounce it, deep-level language understanding. This is a combination of the text understanding that goes into LaMDA, which is the news source of today, and a bunch of AI recreation of using and training an algorithm to understand what those things are and how to represent them with an image. And all of this is going so fast. Just within the last couple of years, this has gone from infancy to being able to create, just with text, high fidelity, realistic images. So what does this mean for the future of education? So let's try to do a little bit of foresight and a little bit of futurist thinking with this, okay? So a lot of people want to ask the question, so am I going to be replaced with a robot? Is my job in danger? Why don't we just have, if we can have a chatbot that looks like a real person, can I deploy it for, to replace a teacher perhaps? And the answer is yes, and the answer is no at the same time. We're already seeing signals of this happening out in the real world with the AI, becoming a bit of an arms race on both sides, on the side of the student and the side of the teacher. So it's pretty easy for a student. Now, let's say you're a language teacher. This happens quite often here in Japan. You're a language teacher, you're teaching English to a native Japanese speaker, and they go off and write something in Japanese and ask an AI algorithm, or lately DeepL has been very popular with this, to just simply translate your Japanese words into English and then try and turn that in as your assignment when you're really supposed to be practicing trying to write English from scratch by yourself. And it's becoming increasingly more difficult just in the last couple of years for teachers to be able to discern. Now, a lot of these teachers can tell probably a little bit better than other people because they've been able and they've been training themselves to suss out some of these subtle differences that happen when you translate Japanese into English. But this is happening on the other side as well. So there are so many things out there now that will take some garbled English and write a full paper for you using some of these topics and information. And so you can have an AI take your idea, take a few paragraphs and basically expand it out into something bigger, something more robust, something with more words that will satisfy some assignment. And that's becoming increasingly hard to suss out as well. Why, of course, being able to just simply copy and paste stuff off the web that's been posted somewhere else is been a kind of a plagiarism problem for professors and teachers forever because there's so much out there. But now it's an arms race on the other side as well. Companies like Turnitin and other companies that are going out and scrubbing the web and actually providing a paid service to professors and colleges and institutions to be able to scan submissions from students to tell if they have been plagiarized or not, or if it's been, I haven't seen this service yet, but I'm sure it might exist, to see if it has been generated by a known AI algorithm. And this becomes an arm race. A lot of like what's happening in content moderation on the large social media platforms. They're trying to automate away a human thing of language and hate speech and graphic nudity and things on their platforms using AI, and they're always getting into problems when they try to train the AI to look for one thing and the language morphs, or the people trying to get inflammatory things on the internet know how to tweak and resolve those things. And so this just becomes an arms race on either end. And I see this accelerating this idea of using AI in different ways even faster. A lot of these things are converging and making the systems and platforms grow even more rapidly. So if you're a language teacher and you're teaching very basic language, I can imagine an AI teacher replacing that type of job earlier than perhaps a philosophy teacher, or maybe somebody teaching how to make AI, for example, or being able to discern from AIs, right? So maybe instead of just being able to teach what a verb is or a noun, or what, the sentence structure is of a specific sentence, an AI teacher might be able to do that in maybe the near future, maybe within the next, maybe I'm going to guess between 10 and 20 years. So what that will mean is that the role of the teacher will change, but I don't see that replacing teachers. We're going to become partners with AIs a lot more. So to be able to understand it, utilize it, detect it, because when you're able to write and do assignments, it doesn't mean that you don't want to get better at something. So this is going to become a philosophical issue in the curriculum development, the learning design. This is something I've been thinking about for a very long time. So multiple choice questions are out the door, and AI can zero in and answer those for students right away. So you're going to want to change the philosophy for which you train students. So students are going to want to also start maybe changing their views, or they start to start to understand where their attention and their development needs to go Because if they don't want to perhaps study ancient history or art, they'll get their AI assistant to help them with that thing. But if they really want to try and become a great artist, they'll sit there and they'll be motivated to put in the time and the effort to do so. So there's a lot of different things that might play out with this. But to answer that question, will an AI replace a teacher? Yes and no. All right. Maybe that was a bit of a rant at this video. I hope it was useful. I hope it was interesting. Please stop by at erichawkinson.com to see more of this research and some of my developments and projects in augmented virtual reality. And we'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye now.